Welcome to TESO Consulting Group's DEI podcast series, Why Is It So Hard? Shining Through the Shadow of Resistance. I'm Dr. Tonya Breland.
And I am Erika. In this podcast series, we'll discuss issues that prevent us from being a socially just society and a free one as well. So the goal here is to disrupt racial inequality and inequities that really present themselves in systems. So each episode will challenge you to be the change that you want to see. So let's get started.
So we're really excited because today is our first podcast. As you can see, we are recording during the holiday season, but we are excited because we first want to just introduce you to what we're doing and why we're doing this. You heard our intro at the very start, but we want to get a little bit more into, why this topic, why are we talking about this? Because I think that this is something that is really important.
Yes.
So when you think about like this whole topic about why is this so hard? I mean, really that's the podcast series itself.
Yes.
Focusing on why this is so hard and shining through the shadow of resistance. What comes to mind for you, Erika, when you're thinking about this topic?
Well, I think it's something that we've just been struggling just in terms of humanity, right? We've been struggling with just treating each other fairly and also addressing inequities in systems. And that's why I think that it's aptly titled, Why Is This So Hard? It just seems to be something that we continually come back to. Something flares up, everybody gets upset, or not enough people get upset, and then we're frustrated all over again. And it just seems to be hard. So we want to sort of unpack some of that. Like, why is it so hard? And I think as you kind of take this journey with us, I think we'll all see that maybe it's not as hard as we thought.
Maybe not. Maybe not. We hope not.
We hope
so
not.
We'll see.
We hope not.
So let's kind of take it back a little bit. So we're both children of the 70s.
Yes, we are.
And, times were different in the 70s. But I'd love to hear a little bit more about your story, Erika.
Sure. So the town where I grew up is now it's predominantly residents of color, but I was there through the change. So when we first got there, it was predominantly white. I lived through sort of the mixed town, and now it's predominantly residents of color. And so, I saw, when my parents moved there, they came. My father's from Philly, North Philly. My mom's from Brooklyn. And so they really wanted something different for their children. But my father and my mother, I think they knew that there were going to be some challenges for us racially. My parents are both African American. They have African American children. And what they saw was that we were going to have our own set of challenges. One of the things my father said was, if you're going to be successful, you're going to have to work twice as hard to get half as far. He said that to us over and over again. And it did two things for us. One, we worked hard. We worked hard in our grades. We worked hard in sports. Whatever we were doing, we worked hard. But the other thing that it did is that it showed us when we didn't quite get recognized like maybe some other kids did, it kind of manifested itself and we understood kind of what it was. It didn't stop us from working hard, but we understood that outside of sports, as African American people, we weren't going to get that much recognition. I think it drove us though. And I think this is where I find myself now, like, how fair is that? How fair is that? And I think that really kind of spurred my work as an educator. So that's kind of a little bit of my mission. What about you, Tonya? How'd you get here?
So, it's interesting. When I was a child, I remember hearing all the time that Black is beautiful. And so as a child, I felt like I'm beautiful. My parents bought dolls that looked like me, which was pretty unique because I don't know that there were, thank you very much. I don't know that there were a lot of dolls, like Black dolls on the market, but I had them. If if they existed, I probably had them. And so I could see myself in the toys that I played with. My first encounter in school, I had a black kindergarten teacher and a black first grade teacher. And what I found out later was that was a time in history in the town that I lived in, and I lived in Illinois. That was a time where there was a big push to diversify the teacher workforce. Sound familiar?
Yep.
And so I happened to have had 2 black teachers at the start of my schooling. By the time I got to second grade, I was the only black child in my second grade class, and I knew it because my teacher treated me differently. And she treated me harshly compared to my friends in the class. And I didn't know anything about racism at the time, but all I kept thinking was, it must be because I'm black that she's treating me this way. And what was interesting was when I became an adult, my parents handed me a box of mementos. They said, here's all your stuff from your childhood. And I'm looking at this box, and inside the box was the report card from my second grade teacher, and she had nothing positive to say to me.
That's crazy.
Nothing. And so I just assumed that this was her. Like, she was a problem. She couldn't see me the way those other teachers saw me. And it wasn't a reflection on me, but it was a reflection on her. But that, I think, was partially the beginning of, what started shaping me and, what it is that I want to do.
I guess that's interesting. We both have these memories from school, right? So we're both former educators. And so you're an elementary, former elementary educator.
And middle. I didn't like it. I didn't like it. Yeah.
That's interesting because I did my student teaching in middle school. I didn't like it either. It's like, get me out of here. But I was much more suited for the high school classroom. But in that early experience, like, how do you think that shaped you as an educator? Like, what are some things
it really made me want to see my children in the classroom. It made me want to make sure that they felt special and that they felt like they were loved and that there was an environment where they belonged. And when I first started teaching, I was teaching in an urban district and later transitioned to a suburban district where I had, more diversity in my classroom. But even with that diversity, I still was really intentional about creating that kind of environment for my kids.
Yeah. Yeah. I think for me, it was like, I felt like I was passed over for opportunities, for access to leadership programs and academic kinds of, those kinds of programs in high school. Felt like I wasn't seen, as you were talking about.
Yeah.
And so for me, it was, I made sure that my kids knew what was happening. I made sure that my students were aware of some of the opportunities that the school or the community offered. And so in that, it really sort of provided information for them. Very often, you don't do something because you don't know that it's there. We're going to talk about some of that, in some of these, some of our podcast episodes. Thank you. But that was really key for me, making sure that they knew what was available to them. And so I think our early memories really kind of shaped the way that we operated, on behalf of our students.
I agree. So when did you realize that you were Black?
That is a good question.
Yeah.
I think actually when we moved onto our street, that's my earliest memory of race. When we moved onto our street in a suburb in New Jersey, there were white kids, there were Black kids, and there was just one little girl who I think we were friendly, but it seemed to me that in other spaces, I was free to kind of play with kids. But in this space, for whatever reason, with this particular girl, I felt like her parents didn't want us to be alone. For whatever reason, it just felt like they were always there. Hovering.
Waiting for something to happen.
Yeah, that's kind of, I got that feeling, And so I don't know, for some reason, I just thought it was because I was Black and she was white. And my father may have confirmed that. My mother may have confirmed that later. But I kind of almost knew instinctively that there was something different about playing with this girl who happened to be white as opposed to my other friends who were not And so that was very early. It must have been about 4 or so.
Wow.
But I realized then, like, okay, there's a difference here. What about
Yeah.
you?
So I have to say it was probably that second grade classroom, because prior to that, I was around more people that looked like me. So they were really affirming spaces. So I don't think I had to think about the distinction between me and others until I saw a difference. And that
Yeah.
difference came in that second grade classroom.
Yeah.
I don't remember it any time after that, but that second grade classroom, it really stood out. But I just didn't have the language to call it what it was.
Sure.
And I think that's when I realized, like, okay, so I'm different, and my being different might mean that I might get treated differently. But even in being treated differently, I didn't think there was something wrong with me, which was good. And I think it was because of those affirming spaces growing up around, family and community, who really said that, Black was beautiful, and, we are somebody, essentially.
Yeah.
I think that was really, really important.
I think that speaks to the importance of just the supportive environment that kids need. And, they need to be affirmed, and they need to be told that, you're okay. Whatever package you come in, you're okay. And so what do you think, like, what have you seen when that doesn't happen, when kids don't get that? What are some things that you've seen that happens when kids are not affirmed?
Well, sadly, we see kids who have issues with anxiety
Yeah.
or depression, or they may act out. Now, the acting out is something that I saw a lot, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And, when I was, depending on where I was in what school system I was in, there were spaces where kids would act out for some teachers and not for others. And I think a lot of it had to do with the environment. And I also think we have to point out how important this is, because these are the kids that grow up to become adults in various workspaces. And, sometimes we see those adults who are loners,
Yeah.
or we see adults who are troublemakers. And it makes you wonder, like, what happened to you when you were a child?
Yes.
Were you in spaces? Did somebody affirm you? Did somebody make you feel that you were someone who belonged?
Yeah.
It reminds me of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. We talk about that sometimes when we're training. And, Maslow says that every human being, not just children, every person, adult, child, needs to feel like they belong.
Yeah.
And when they don't feel like they belong, then you create some problems.
Yes. They need that connection.
Yeah.
They need to feel like they're rooted in this space, that we want you here and you're valued. And you're right, when they don't feel that, and they continue to not feel that. So if I don't feel that at school, and then I don't feel that in my community, and maybe I don't feel that at work, then we have these issues really with disconnection.
That's correct.
And then we don't achieve, and we don't feel good. And we don't care if other people feel good as well. So it's not just a matter of, wanting a kid to feel good. It's like this kind of reverberates in some other spaces. And I think that that's really important as well.
So then when you think about, this topic, and you think about, why we do what we do, because we always say, like, we love what we do. Why do you think this, like, what's the connection between what we do, where we come from, what we love about what we do? Like, how do you connect all of that?
That's a really good question. So when I was younger and much more immature, and like as a teenager,
Yeah.
when I sort of felt frustrated, with sort of like racial interaction, I used to think to myself, like, I'm just going to be around Black people. I'm just going to work around Black people. I'm going to go to church with Black people. I'm going to my family's. And that's not realistic.
Because it's not the world.
It's not the
No.
world. Exactly. We're diverse. And we come, even if I did sort of, kind of separate myself, even within the African American community, there's diversity within that, right?
Sure, absolutely.
Different cultural backgrounds, different languages, different expectations. And so, the idea that you would just separate yourself, it's like you said, it's just not the world. And so the reality is that in all spaces, we're just becoming increasingly diverse. We're becoming increasingly diverse. And in past generations, maybe we didn't necessarily have to learn to live and work and, shop and, dine together and go to school together. But now we do, and I think it's important for us to not just do it because it's obligatory, but to do it and just understand that, our strength lies in our differences.
That's true. And I think that's a really important point to make when we talk about, diversity in this world. And this of course has a lot to do with the kind of work that we do every day. And we're talking about it right now, but I mean, this is deep. Like, this isn't just like some shallow conversation, like, i.e. why we are doing this podcast. There's a lot to really unpack when we're talking about issues of diversity and, where we are in this world or where we are individually. It's significant.
It is. And think about, like, when we're not in spaces where we feel accepted for our culture, for our race, like, think about how you feel. Like, this is about, like, how people feel. And it has implications in terms of our mental health. It has implications in terms of, how we interact with each other. I want to be in spaces where I feel good and others do too. And I know that sounds kind of pie in the sky, but think about it, very often when we're not getting along, think about the danger that, that comes to us, that comes to others. And for kids, it's just not fair, really. So I love the spaces when we're able to talk to people who interact with kids, because we want kids to be in spaces where they understand that, there are differences, but that doesn't sort of present a hierarchy. It doesn't, you don't have to judge people based on their differences. You actually can get along in those differences, right? And so I think that's really a part of, particularly as an educator, one of my greatest privileges was really to work in a super diverse district and really get kids in the spaces where they were learning to understand and work with and learn each other. It was a really great feeling.
Yeah, and that was actually one of the reasons why we moved to a town with our kids that was diverse, because we wanted our kids to be able to understand that, number one, we live in a diverse world. Number two, they need to be able to get along with everybody. And, there's a way that we may interact when we're just with each other, and there's a way that we interact when we're with other people. And so, this was an opportunity for us to teach our children how to be able to get along in this world with whomever. And I think it served them well, because I've got adult kids now and a grandchild.
Congratulations.
And, it's so key. They work in spaces where they are able to connect with the people that they work with. And sometimes they may encounter situations where race comes up. Actually, a lot of times they work in situations where race comes up, and they are confronted with how they're going to engage and or even educate people. And that's really, I think that's something that came from how we reared them as parents, and also what we want for them, as they continue to, like, raise the next generation.
We made similar decisions to just live in a really diverse community. We didn't want our kids to be, the only, right? And we also wanted them to see the diversity in humanity and in the neighborhood. And I think they had similar experiences. I mean, really just coming down to, one of the things that they did that I don't think our generation was really taught to do, our kids learned names. They were very intentional about pronouncing names, regardless of where, what language or what culture their friend's name, came from. They were very intentional, and they did not use nicknames unless it was, permitted. I mean, it was a really good, it taught me really about that how elemental, and we do some work around
We
names
do.
and making
Yeah.
sure that educators kind of understand
And
the
honor.
importance and honor and honor one's name. But I think that diversity and really sort of encouraging our kids to just have a really diverse circle of friends. I think it does serve them not only in the K-12 setting, but also in college. You know,
And
our kids went
beyond.
to diverse universities and also and beyond. Absolutely.
But
Yeah.
I will say that even as children, they were confronted with racism.
Sure.
I remember a story where our daughter was in a dance class at maybe 7, 8 years old, and a girl said that her face was dirty because she was brown. And you know, the way that she handled it wasn't the way that we taught her, but she handled it. And so, you know, it was something that, you know, she carried with her though.
Yes.
And it was probably one of her first encounters with, you know, somebody having a bias towards her, which, you know, kind of brings us full circle back to, you know, why we do what we do. Because we do a lot of this racial equity work. And this racial equity work is, I think, some of the hardest work because historically in our country, we've had some issues.
We have, and
And
there are,
continue to have issues.
we do. There are things we don't even see. There are inequities that we've just sort of taken as this is just how things are. And the good news is that they don't have to be that way,
That's true.
right? We can change. We can be the change that we want to see. But the challenge is we have to see that it needs to be changed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You remind me of a quote that James Baldwin shared. And it's like, not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it is faced. And so we do this work because we believe that we can help make change. And some of that change needs to be systemic because the problems that we have in our society did not just start with some individuals. There were systems that were set up and put in place specifically to make it difficult for people who look like you and me to be able to get ahead in this world. And those systems are still at play even today.
Unfortunately.
Unfortunately.
Unfortunately, they are.
But I believe that there's hope. Like, you know, like we wouldn't do this work if there weren't hope. You know, hope that we can make some changes, that we can lead people to think about how they do what they do, to create a lens that's a little bit different, where they see things a little bit differently, where they begin to see where inequities lie in society and in systems. I think all of that is why we do what we do.
And so we really just invite you to take this journey with us, right? To unpack some things personally, some things collectively. What are we noticing in our society? What are we noticing that, you know, we would really like to change? What are some things maybe we didn't notice and we didn't realize, you know, there were those barriers there. And although some of this seems hard, it's, you know, we're frustrated really by the persistence of these challenges. What we know is that there is an opportunity for change, and that it starts with us, and we're going to take a look at these systems, and at the end we are going to be able to say, now that wasn't so hard, was it?
No, was it? You know, that's what we're going to ask you, you know, but we want you to consider all of these things.
Yes.
We are TESO Consulting Group. I'm Tonya.
And I'm Erika.
And we're glad that you joined us today.